Senator from the 15th.
Mr. President, this is a survive budget, not a thrive budget. This is a budget that, if we are lucky, will allow our child care providers, our public schools, our universities to survive for 2 more years, in the hopes that those of us in the inner ring here find ourselves in the outer ring 2 years from now to actually be in a position to give them what they truly need to thrive. This budget will not allow them to thrive, and the people of Wisconsin deserve better. I want to give credit to our leader, the senator from the 27th, and to Governor Evers, because they did negotiate hard to get the bipartisan agreement that we have in front of us, to move this budget in the direction that it moved from where our Republican colleagues started. They knew, we all knew, we were in alignment as Democrats on what our priorities were: supporting kids from birth through higher education, ensuring access to health care, protecting our environment, supporting our local governments, increasing access to housing. These are priorities that Democrats share and that we fought for in this budget, and we improved this budget. Why? Because elections matter, and fair maps matter, and the fact that this body is more balanced than it was last session, and will be even more balanced next session after we have had all Senate seats elected on our new fair maps, that meant something. That gave us leverage. That gave us an opportunity to actually have a negotiation that included Senate Democrats. And that is why we are here debating a budget at all, and it's why the budget includes so many of the things that it did not include when Joint Finance voted to strip them out of Governor Evers' budget or even threatened to cut our university system. So we saw where Republicans started with this. Nothing for childcare, a cut to UW, and genuine crumbs for our public schools. And we have moved forward on each of those issues in meaningful ways. But it's simply not enough. It is simply not enough. Now, we understand the urgency to act. We understand that there are healthcare dollars at stake because Congress is actively in the process of restricting our future funding and cutting funding to our state, and we are trying to beat Congress in that action by getting this budget to Governor Evers' desk so that we can lock in at a higher level of healthcare funding than we would be locked in at otherwise. I understand that. This budget must move forward so that that can happen, but that doesn't make it a good budget. This budget fell far short of what was needed on our top priorities, far short of what our kids in our schools and our institutions of higher learning need. And there are so many other bipartisan items, many of which we gave you the opportunity to vote on today in the form of amendments, that we could have done in here. The rule of 17 is broken on this budget. This budget does not have 17 Republican votes. We just saw that, and we'll see that again shortly. Democratic votes are necessary to get this over to the Assembly and then to the governor's desk. And so there are so many additional things that we know the majority of Democrats support and the majority of Republicans support that we could have also done in this budget once the rule of 17 was out the window. And I frankly don't know why we didn't. Fixing the housing programs that we passed last budget that you all voted down earlier. Funding some of the agricultural initiatives that aren't in here that you all voted down earlier. The veterans and surviving spouses property tax credit, for goodness sakes. But none of those are in the budget we're about to vote on. And postpartum Medicaid expansion. Everyone in this body has voted for that. One person didn't this session, but did last session, but it was still 32-1 this session. And the only person, we all know this, holding it up is Robin Vos, the Speaker in the Assembly. We had a chance today to force his hand on this must-pass bill. We could have tacked on postpartum Medicaid and sent it to the Assembly, and Robin Vos would have had no choice but to pass it. And we missed that opportunity when you tabled our amendments en masse. That was one of them, and it was also in our health care amendment earlier. So know that you did that. And we also missed an opportunity to extend the stewardship program. And I know there's talk of coming back in the fall, and I hope we do. But wouldn't it have been easier to do it today when the rule of 17 wasn't on the table than to try to see if you can get 17 Republican votes in the fall or get leadership to break that rule again later? Wouldn't it have been easier to just get it done today? Now, there are a couple other critical ways that this falls short. Yes, there are some tax cuts in here that will help folks, but this budget is going to fail to stop massive property tax hikes in many of our school districts because of the lack of funding for education and the missed opportunities to hold steady municipal property taxes by putting in additional funding. The number one tax concern we all hear is property taxes. So what does this budget do? It cuts income taxes. That's wonderful. It cuts sales taxes. That's wonderful. But it's going to drive up property taxes, the least popular form of tax that we all hear complaints about. Why? And by failing to expand Medicaid, not just postpartum, but fully, we are once again leaving $1.3 billion in federal dollars on the table, perhaps now permanently if Congress passes this big bad bill and blocks us from getting that sweetener in the future. And rest assured, when we are in the majority, we will expand Medicaid. We will just do it without that extra $1.3 billion. You have given away the opportunity to negotiate with us about how to spend those dollars, and instead you have left them in Washington, D.C. But we will still expand Medicaid when we have the chance. And speaking of that big bad bill in D.C., this budget starves us of future funds that we may need if the federal government cuts Medicaid, SNAP, education money. So this budget just does not meet the mark of the political moment we find ourselves in. And don't get me wrong, I support items in here. I mentioned some of them already, and there are others that matter to me, to my district, that I am glad Senate Democrats were able to achieve through our negotiations. But when I talk to folks in my district, it's not enough. It's better than it would have been if we hadn't been at the table, but it is not good enough. And so Democratic votes for this today are not an endorsement. They are an acknowledgement that this budget is better than no budget, and certainly better than the one that Republicans proposed. But this budget doesn't deserve one more Democratic vote than is needed to pass, and so my vote is no.